Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome a new friend of mine to the show. I'll be interviewing JustJess42 from Instagram. She is a creative professional in corporate America, as she claims. And, oh, no, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. She's a digital professional, not a creative, a digital professional, though she is quite creative. And one of her main hobbies is building her own custom Lego sets, which blows my mind, the talent she has. So we'll be showing a little bit of that later. So for just to get right into it, let's go ahead and welcome Jessica. Hi, Jess. How are you
Hey
doing?
there. Hey, I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me. This is really cool.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very
Yeah, it's so
excited.
good to have you here. It's been great to
Yeah,
to get to know you over the last, few weeks, get to talk to you here and there. The pre-interview is
here,
always
here.
fun.
Ah,
Um,
amen.
Welcome in, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm gonna see. I don't know if I have a mod in here yet.
Sure.
Might be doing some things manually here, but I'll be conducting the interview with Jess and taking your questions throughout it. Please go ahead and type at the Transgender Show before your question so that it pops up for me there so I can see it really well. And either I will ask her the question right when you ask it if it fits in with what we're doing and I see it in time. Otherwise, we'll take it after the break after we've gone through the main set of questions. Welcome in, Rosa. Hi, Julie and Rennie and Ellie. Oh, thank you so much for the follow. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in.
Good.
Jess, when did you first realize that you were different as a kid? What were some of those signs when you were younger that you were a little different?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think only now looking back can I kind of recognize things that hadn't necessarily stood out to me at the time. Um, but I think one of the things I remember walking around with my mom in like department stores, and other moms would come by and stop us, and they'd be like, "Oh, look at your little one, and their eyelashes are so long, and their nails are so long, and like that's so pretty. I wish I had those." And I remember my head being like, "No, they're mine." Like that was I wanted, I wanted to hold like I wanted that, and I like that they thought that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always sort of awkward that I wasn't supposed to be proud of, but yeah, that was one of the younger thoughts. But really, the earliest I can remember having any thought about presenting any differently was around fifth or sixth grade, and I was a big fan of the cartoon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Mm-hmm.
April O'Neil was my first crush. Loved that yellow jumpsuit. I didn't, I was too young to really understand, what kind of a crush or even a girlfriend meant. But I still, when I would go to bed at night, I would dream on going adventures with her. Whatever happened on the show, like we would reenact that together, the two of us in my dreams.
Hmm.
Um, but there's always some convoluted reason I had to disguise myself as her. And I don't know there's anything before that, but that's the earliest I can remember ever thinking about presenting differently, about that thought suddenly kind of getting into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it kind of just stayed there. I didn't really act on it. It was not something I focused on or reflected on anything more. Yeah, like later on, I got to think, okay, I have like this fetish basically that like I'd become
Yeah.
aware of that had been sort of the origin to it, or that's why I thought it was.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
I
very,
hadn't
very
really
common
done
for
that.
us, to have that where it's not until much later that when we come out, we can look back and tie together all the little breadcrumbs. You'd see them there.
Seriously. Like I'm still uncomfortable. Like, I was like, you're such a handsome man. I hated that. Like,
Mm.
I can handle boy, but never man. That was a word I did not feel comfortable trying to own in any way.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's again, but I didn't think about why I felt
Mm.
uncomfortable with that. It was just true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what made that change for you? What, as I say, cracked your egg to make you realize that
Right?
you were trans and
Yeah.
get started down that path?
Well, and it was a long path, at least in my mind, it was. And the accepting that I was trans was basically the last step or nearly last step of it. I think it's more that I think after college, I tried dressing up a few times. and
Mm-hmm.
I would go, I went online because suddenly there was online shopping was a thing, and I could go and buy some really cheap stuff, have it sent to me. And when I put it on and I looked in the mirror, it was depressing. I didn't like what I saw. It was kind of sad and this feels almost too mean, but it was still true that almost in this pathetic way. I would look at that and be like, oh, that's not, I don't want to be like it was just something that was more demoralizing than it was exciting
Mm-hmm.
or encouraging.
Yeah, your first
And
experience with dysphoria.
yeah. They were, it's something that I didn't, yeah, I hadn't reflected on it until I was seeing it in that contrast and it falling so far short of what I hoped to see. So I shoved everything in the back of the closet. I never purged because I was too lazy and I put it too far away in the back of the closet to go find it and pull it out. But I still shoved everything away and I basically ignored it until years later. It's like maybe every few years I would try it once and be like, no, this isn't working, and I would
Mm-hmm.
shove things away.
And
Um,
what caused that, like kind of putting it away, was that dysphoria you felt? You saw yourself and you liked the clothes, but you didn't like the way you looked in the mirror, and that disconnect was causing a lot of problems for you?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. It's something that even now I still struggled in fully acknowledging it as dysphoria, which I think is as much my own acceptance of that. But like, I didn't have a pervasive feeling that necessarily that things were wrong all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I anticipated euphoria that I did not get. And it wasn't necessarily that I even liked these clothes or that I liked these particular objects. It's that when I put them together with me, the end result was not the end result was not any kind of end result that I found appealing for myself. That
Mm-hmm.
was not that, yeah.
And
That
sort of
wasn't
like a
reflective of any aspect of me that, I was happy with.
yeah, and it's
Sorry.
not matching with what you had in your head, kind of what you were hoping for.
Yeah. I think hoping for is the right word. So I didn't necessarily have anything in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I think that felt too much to hope for. But I still hoped for it when I would dress up, and then I would be depressed
Mm-hmm.
when I didn't see what I wanted to see. Um, but
Yeah.
I think because again, I didn't necessarily have that strong sense of dysphoria, at least not that I've seen other people experience. I was largely able to just be like, okay, this isn't going to happen, and put it away for years at a time.
Yeah.
It was probably 7 or 8 years in the last stretch of not dressing before I kind of came back for good.
Okay.
And I I had been I had grown out a beard. I had a good size, yeah, beard, and not huge, but it was decent. Um, and I I wasn't taking very good care of myself. I wasn't horribly slovenly, but I was not, I was not watching what I ate or drank or anything. I was just kind of being.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine took me out, and this is in 2015. Took me to a bar after work, and sat me down and kind of was like, "Hey, you seem cheerful all the time, but something seems off because I've just been watching you kind of slowly, cheerfully slide downhill. Like, what's the deal? What's going on?" Um, and it was a wake up call that I think I needed to hear. And again, it wasn't necessarily explicitly tied to the sense that I'm not me, but I definitely wasn't taking any pride or just joy, I guess, in being me. It was a
Mm-hmm.
sense that like it's just how I was, and I didn't really care a lot about it, and I just let it go, and because I'd also let the other dream go, that every time I look, I'm not liking what I see, and so I'm like, okay, then there's nothing to really shoot for. That I'm not going to necessarily feel attractive, and that's okay, and kind of let that slide.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I guess I got to that point, and so then I think when I heard that, then I kind of resolved. I'm like, all right, you know what? This is just not healthy. I want to be better. I want to take better care of myself. And there was also that notion in the back of my head that like, all right, if I can set a goal and reach that goal, then you know what? I'm gonna give that whole dressing thing one more try. Because maybe that was part of it. Maybe I just didn't know enough about what I was doing. I discovered different communities on Reddit and saw different makeup tips and things like that. And so I'm like, all right, maybe there's a little bit more I know now. And if I pair that with taking some better care of myself, then maybe the end result won't be that same depressing one. And if it is, then I'll know for good that this isn't for me. At least I thought that was the thinking and line of thought in my head. Um, and so over the course of 2015, because I was in the beginning of the year that she, kind of shook me. I started counting calories. Not that weight is an end all be all, but I think it was still a good motivating factor for me that I lost 35 pounds over the course of that year.
Oh, wow. Great.
And yeah, and I got back to basically my sophomore weight. I didn't get to my freshman weight, but I got back to after freshman 15 weight.
Hmm.
And that had been my goal. I'm like, all right, I'm going to get that by the end of the year. And I got there like the day before New Year's. And
Okay.
so I yeah, I'm like, all right, I think I've done it. And so January 1st, 2016, I woke up and I shaved off the beard and arms and legs, and I went for it. I dressed up and again, I think because I had learned more, I was more purposeful in what I was doing and what I knew to hide and what I was uncomfortable with and what I wanted to accentuate. That this time when I put it all together, I was really pleasantly shocked. Even this is surprised. I was like, oh, holy cow, that's okay. Like I can work with this. Like this is something that yeah,
Interesting.
that feels more me.
So do you think that
Um,
it was that the weight was the main factor in that, or was there something else? I mean, I'm assuming if you've turned this corner and you've decided that it's time for you to start taking care of yourself, and you actually set this goal of, if I meet this, I'll try the dressing thing. So I'm wondering if there was something else like in your mindset or something else you were doing that also kind of made what you saw in the mirror different.
yeah, I think there's a few combinations of factors, and so obviously the weight had been a stumbling block for me, but I think that was also because I didn't necessarily know what to wear with the shape of my body, and so that I think I often heard that people, excuse me, that people dress how they would have in their adolescence. This sort of like I miss these teenage years, at least for those a lot of us who grapple with this later in life, or farther on in life. I missed this moment, and so I'm gonna dress like I'm in, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever decade you would have been a teenager in. Like that's the way you dress. And so I think there's an element of that.
Hmm.
And that's probably not going to match the body you have now, again, if you are doing it a bit older. And
Yeah.
so I think that was a big part of it, that like nothing I was picking was in any way flattering to the physique I had.
Yeah, yeah, because
Um,
it's really hard to know fashion,
and,
yeah, especially like you said, you've got this ideal in your mind, even if it's not really conscious. And
right.
there were these things that appealed to you at a certain time when you were impressionable, and that's what you really wanted, but you couldn't do. So now it's like, oh, I can do this now, and you're like, why isn't this working?
Right, right. Yeah. Believe me, I'd love to do the 90s alt rock girl with a choker. I don't know that's always the right look to do. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's okay. But yeah, it was that was absolutely a big chunk. The other huge chunk for me, and it's still at times a thing, is my shadow. I have very heavy shadow. Like I said, I had a beard, but frankly, no matter how close I shave and how smooth everything feels, because of how dark my hair is and how pale my skin is, I can see every root. Like it's all still visible. And I had, I think seeing that, especially in seeing my face above this other body, even when I was doing better at the other part of the body and
Yeah.
how to dress, was the most discordant and depressing element.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, figuring out how to do some stuff covering up my shadow, I think that in itself was probably the most significant
Hmm.
difference for me. Yeah, in just yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I want to take a second really quick to welcome everybody again. We've got a lot more people coming in. We've got a lot of your friends here. Jess,
Awesome.
Astro Amy is saying that she was there when you started posting in 2016. She says they grew up so fast, and she's got a little tear there. Very cute. Got a ton of follows. Thank you all so much for the follows. I know a lot of you are here specifically for Jess. It's your first time here, so I really appreciate you coming. And Jess, thanks for the promotions on that. Okay, so now you've finally gotten to this place where you've you're not super happy with what you see in the mirror, but you're happier. It's finally not this, huge wave of dysphoria that's causing you to put everything away again. What were your next steps right after that? We're leading up to when you came out, but I'm kind of curious about that in between time, because you've come to this for you've been working towards this for such a long time, and now you're here. Um, what were your next steps?
Sure. Um, well, no, it's even interesting there, like the time between then and coming out, because honestly, in my head, I still don't feel like I've mostly come out. Most
Mm.
people in my life still don't know. I'm still a work in progress there, but that we can also talk about. Um,
I mean that's one
yeah, I mean,
I know a couple girls that are like that now that are beautiful, have great photos, look like women, present completely. It's just like mind blowing that you're not out. I did it completely the opposite of that. I was out before, long before I could even vaguely pass. It was probably some really cringeworthy stuff. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating that you are in in the stage that you're at, far
right.
far beyond where I'm at, and you're not fully out. And we will definitely get into that in the next section. But yeah, so yeah, what were some of those first steps?
Sure. Well, yeah, I think again that there was that moment where I was happy with what I saw. That I actually found myself attractive. And I'll say
Mhm.
I'll note that because I think one thing I've consistently experienced is much more of the gender euphoria of feeling so happy when I feel like I'm seeing Jess in the mirror, um, and less often explicit negatives. That to a degree that I often said like I didn't feel like I had dysphoria. Now I think in hindsight I can reflect on other things, but however it was, I usually didn't. It wasn't necessarily experienced or felt emotionally in a terribly severe way,
Mhm.
versus extreme highs that I would often experience. And so I definitely had a high, after that first day. And I'd say probably like the first couple weeks, it was just every day me trying to put together all the different outfits I could and take pictures of all of them. And I had this pent up, all right, what do I do with this? And I had
Mhm.
followed some different communities on Reddit. I created a second complete nonsense Reddit username,
Mhm.
aside from my other Reddit name, which against in the future I will hopefully eventually merge them. The other one has all of my Lego karma in it, but my boy account. But then I had this new account that I was posting on Reddit with. Um, I wanted to post, but I wasn't doing it yet. And I had gotten some great tips from the cross-dressing subreddit. I never felt entirely comfortable with cross-dressing, which is unfortunate and I think unfair. I think gender fluid was where I felt a little bit more comfortable with. I think just because for good or ill, there can be again that sort of fetishy context that's sometimes applied to cross-dressing, however fairly or unfairly. But still,
Uh-huh.
that subreddit was still a place where I could go and um, but before I went there was another place called CD Safe Haven. And that's a place where you had to ask permission to join, and only people who were in it could see whatever anyone else posted in there. So it was in theory a completely closed community of like-minded people to share.
Okay.
And so like, all right, well, this seems
Nice.
like the safest place to share. This is where I'm going to start.
Good safe
So
spot. Yeah.
I think this looks great. I need other people to weigh in here. And so I reached out and asked to join it. Of course, the people who were modded that community were on holidays because it was New Year's Day. So responding right away. And so like 3 days later, they let me in. But by then I had so much pent up and so many pictures pent up that I posted on there the second they let me in, and then almost simultaneously went over and posted on the public cross-dressing subreddit too, because I needed to start sharing.
you
And
were you were there, you were doing it, so you had to share it. We talked about this in the pre-interview too, that weird kind of juxtaposition that you run into at that point in your transition where you still feel shame or like confusion about about the cross-dressing and or about presenting that way, and you have a lot of fear, and yet you're somehow compelled to present it publicly. Like
yeah,
the greatest fear you have is someone seeing you and catching you, blah blah blah. But it's also sort of this thing that drives you, that you want people to see this. It's a very interesting thing. So it's kind of funny that, like, yeah, as soon as you kind of realized that, you just went 100 miles an hour into that.
there's definitely a new and different sort of pride that I had never felt before. And it was an aspect of myself that I saw myself in a different light I had never seen before. And so I wanted other
Mm-hmm.
people to see that too.
Mm.
And It definitely continued to escalate where I always felt like, all right, well, what's kind of next? And I would say, even as I'm doing that, I think I was also conscious and sometimes concerned. I'm like, okay, well, is this just me escalating again, like following a high versus being trans? And honestly, for the most of the first couple of years, I think I wanted to believe I was trans, but didn't believe I was because that felt too good to be true. That felt
Okay.
like I was indulging something or claiming something that wasn't mine. I would see other people who had terrible dysphoria, who struggled with it, who knew this was wrong. I didn't feel that same weight. I just felt the joy primarily of presenting differently. And so I had a hard time. It's something that a judgment I would never make of anyone else. I constantly made of myself. That this isn't. I'm not really that. That would be awesome, but that's yeah. That would be presumptuous to say I'm that.
Yeah, and that's another common thing. I think that was definitely something that I went through. The trying to reach some semblance of validity, feelings of validity in yourself as a trans person, and yeah, you see other people, you hear the main narrative that goes along with being trans, that you felt like you were in the wrong body the whole time and all of that. It's all from the dysphoria slant, and you never hear about it from the euphoria side, that where you
Right.
finally are able to express yourself, you just feel so much better, so much more like yourself. And there's not enough talk, I feel, about how that is exactly equally as valid as
Yeah.
the other side, the positive side.
Right.
Maybe some of us just don't have that dysphoria. We've got a little bit of a
Yeah.
something, confusion, something. But yeah, I love to talk about how you are a valid trans person if you have the euphoria when you present in the correct gender.
Right.
One of my big things was I was really surprised at how wonderful it felt to be called ma'am and be gendered correctly. I wasn't quite prepared for how euphoric that would make me feel and how validating that was.
Yeah. I'm just smiling too because I was reflecting this past weekend, and my friends were making fun of me as we were going around through Hudson Yards in the mall, and someone said "ma'am." I'm like, "Oh, they said ma'am and not miss." And someone's like, "Well, you did just have your birthday." I'm like, "Oh, right." Um, um, but yeah, see I think the next thing for me was starting to share with kind of people I already knew and people who knew me the other way. It's one great thing to have this new connection and new communities online. And I went from Reddit to Facebook and then on to Instagram and eventually other different channels and Flickr. But I wanted, I think, to kind of share with someone in my life. And so I mentioned that friend who pushed me. And I think I heard you say her name and being in the chat, but my friend Leilani and
Oh,
my other
okay.
friend Jen were two best friends at work. We were sort of the work family. Um, and I kind of selfishly picked them too because they're two friends who are in the LGBTQ family. So I felt like that would be a safer place to start.
Hmm.
Um, and, and I want to say it was February, March. It's weird that I can't quite remember this, but like it was some still early in the spring point of the year, or technically winter part of the year, where I took them to the bar across the street from work. This loud beer hall, and we sat down at a table, and friend Jen got there first, and I just decided, all right, I'm going to share this. I need to tell somebody and get the reaction of somebody, wherever ill. I had, like you said, it's like you feel compelled. I don't know if I could
Hmm.
rationally or even that kind of that risk, but I still felt like I needed to.
Yeah.
Um, and I tried to explain what was going on, and I did such a terrible job that Jen thought I was saying I like to dress fancy at home. Like she thought I was in a tuxedo walking around my apartment. Like it was so poorly articulated. And finally, one of the waitresses walks by, and she's in a dirndl because it's at this German restaurant, and I go, I have one of those. And it was like, oh. And then the pictures came out, and that's when Leilani showed up because she came a little bit later, and she was great. And frankly, and I hope you can take this well out there in the audience, but was like almost too enthusiastic, where she's like, "All right, you're going to transition, and you'll do this, and you'll do this," and whoa, not quite there yet. Um, but still, that support was huge, and it was so happy, and they had that same kind of joy that I had, I think, been seeing for myself that was hugely validating.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and even then, I think in April we went together to a place up near Woodstock. And it was a cabin, rented cabin for a weekend. And it
Yeah.
was myself and those two and their spouses and some kids thrown in the mix. And I presented, I still was not brave enough to go into town, but I still, I presented as Jess with them back at the house. And that was crazy. There's definitely still uncomfortable moments, very uncomfortable about my voice, very self-conscious for anyone who knew what I normally sounded like
Hmm.
to even try to do anything different. So there's definitely, I felt, huge. I felt tall, like all those different things that are, take a while to acclimatize, especially around cis women. But yeah, it was still a pretty incredible experience. Something I'm still
Oh.
so grateful to get to do.
Well, I love that, you feel compelled to come out to friends and you're hoping for their support. And not only are they super supportive, but they're more on board with it than you are. I love that irony of it.
Prescient.
Leilani says you did a wonderful job when in coming out.
Very sweet, very sweet. Thanks to the support. Though she would still scold me about my mom, which I know will be another topic we'll get into, and rightly so. Um, um, but yeah, I did get a makeover, and that's something that for me was huge and another validating experience. And I went to someone who was known for working with trans women. There's a lot of different services you can do, but a lot of them tend to be a little bit more glam and maybe a little bit more towards the drag end of things, which of
Uh-huh.
course can be a wonderful thing if you want that look, but that was not what I wanted. I wanted an everyday kind of sense of what I could look like. And I also knew for all that I had made huge strides from what I expected, and I was so much more pleased with how I was looking than I thought I could be. Um, there's still so much I didn't know. I couldn't. I'd gotten like 9 different foundations. None of them matched my paleness. That was nowhere close. Um, I I had like I think I still at one point had like 50 wigs, but they were
Huh.
all like $20 ones. So like I would
Uh-huh.
get like 2 wears out of them, and then they look terrible. So again, sorry, not to cast aspersions on anyone who has great looking $20, but that was something that I'm like, all right, there's a couple things here that I really want to upgrade, or I really want an expert to kind of look at on me and help guide me.
Yeah, and those
Um,
are two of the big ones, right? Like makeup, it's just such a question mark when you start. You have
it,
no idea, and it's really overwhelming. And then
yeah,
and it's really easy to spend a lot of money on that really quick. And then the wigs, the
mhm,
same thing. A good wig is can be hundreds of dollars, and
yeah.
it's not something you want to jump into. So it's definitely important to have somebody that can guide you in that.
Mhm. Though I'll also acknowledge, and it's something that it's almost weirdly at times guilty about, but I have so much privilege in my life in so many different ways. And one of them is even being single and having a good job and being at this point in life, that I was able to invest in a lot of these things I wanted to explore.
Hmm.
And so that makeover artist is not cheap. I would highly recommend her, Monica Prada. She does excellent work. Um, but yeah, it was like a minimum 4 hours. The hourly rate was not low. That did not include what I spent on Sephora or the makeup, the wig store, like, a number of other places. Like, it was all in addition to that. So, yeah, I laid down, I don't even quite wanna think about how much, but it was a lot. Um, but, yeah, for me, I felt like it was worth it because I came out of it with so mumuch confidence about
Oh,
what I was
wonderful.
doing. I still do a lot of the same makeup techniques, with the exception that I do more to cover my shadow. Because again, she's used to working with women who have already gotten laser and are, like, well on their way,
Okay.
like, and that wasn't at the time, especially, that I still didn't know that was in my cards.
Hmm.
Um, it could be.
Yeah, that I
Yeah.
think the shadow is definitely my big issue, and my God, I cannot wait till places open again so I can go back and get more laser treatments. I was so close.
Right. I
Um,
hear you. I
so
hear you.
so that was how you came out. I don't know. I guess that kind of counts in two areas. Would you consider that more just like kind of coming out to friends, or kind of that was that you're coming out at work? Like, what's your level of out at work at this
Sure,
point? Let's
sure.
start
Yeah,
there.
no, that was very much coming out to friends. And in
Okay.
many ways, for all them still coming out to other people at work, I still feel like it's more about friends. It's almost always still people I feel close to. Or I feel like I just get a good vibe from. We already get along well. Sorry, as I'm doing this, like I feel like my necklace is catching my neck. All right. That's something else I'm not used to with longer hair. is it's learning how to navigate all that. But yeah, no, I am not fully out, I think, in any arena, and so work is definitely amongst them.
Mm.
It's one of those subconscious things. I realized I gave you that very nebulous "am in corporate America," thing. I don't know why, because I post about my work all the time on Instagram. I walk, my pictures over the weekend had me with my Pfizer mask on, so I work for Pfizer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, but there's tens of thousands of employees, and maybe a couple hundred know.
All
Like
right.
it's not like they would know me anyway. It's a huge company, but still, I went to lately. It's been sort of everyone I report to. I'm like, hey, I want you to know this, just because I recognize there could be ramifications in the future. But generally speaking, there are also people I like and know or respect, so I also have a level of comfort. In fact, everyone I've come out to at work has universally been super positive, and we've almost felt closer afterwards. To the point that now, if I'm having kind of a down day, I'm like, all right, well, who's someone I can come out to? Because it's like it's always been positive for both of us. I think.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say too much, but it feels like that every time. They're always like, wow, and we chat. Like it's constantly been awesome.
I
So I
love that
feel
you have
very
that
much.
many people at work that you can that you still have some that don't know, so you can find pick somebody out and just recreate that experience again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's hundreds just in my department, and I've gotten maybe a third, maybe half. Like, yeah, there's tons of people I can still get to. Now I will say I've become more and more active in the LGBTQ work group at Pfizer.
Oh, okay,
Um,
cool.
yeah, I'm actually gonna I'm co-chairing our New York chapter this year, and I'm leading
Mm.
communications for it globally. Um, it's something that I talked about with that sort of executive leadership, that sort of awkward tension that here I am doing something much more public, but I'm not actually noticeably out to a lot of these people. But like I'm like within this community, I feel like it's comfortable. If it goes beyond the community, there's this weird kind of tension. Or post my picture, but don't put my name, or like all these other different little accommodations to make.
Yeah.
Um, but
No,
work
that
has been
makes sense.
consistently awesome. I'm actually Jess at Pfizer.com. No last name. I'm the Jess. I'm Jess at
Nice.
Pfizer.com. They gave me that alias.
Mm.
And I mentioned why. I'm like, I want an alias for my address, but I don't want a separate inbox. And the guy's like, this is really unusual. Why are you doing this? I'm like, all right, well, here's the deal. And he's like, oh, wow. Well, great. All right, I'm gonna assign it to me. Don't worry. We'll handle this. So like they were like excited to do it.
Oh,
So yeah, work has been a place where I've uh, consistently felt positive and also had tons of opportunities. And I
okay,
don't,
that's
and
great.
I'm sort of kind of doing a bleed on here. I don't know if this is any way tokenism, but for the moment, I'm riding it. I get to do a lot of different things. I've gone to the Out and Equal Workplace Summit, which, if people aren't aware, is this great, crazy, huge thing where like some 6,000 LGBT professionals, not just LGBTQ, but 6,000 different professionals from almost every major corporation in America and several major government institutions
Mm.
get together to talk about LGBTQ issues in the workplace. That's where I met one of your prior interviewees, Andy. We
Okay.
met at one of those events. Yeah, and so it's awesome. So I got to go in person when we were able to go in person a couple years ago, and then online this past year, I got to see Bernie speak at an LGBTQ event.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, the Victory Fund.
Mm.
Again, I was there attending for work, and I got to go to the HRC gala.
Mm.
I did a whole thing on Instagram, helped me pick my gown, and then I went to this gala and staying at a table like at the front of the room, and all these executives from the company and me. And again, maybe they just want to transfer to the table, but I'm like, hey, I will be that trans person who gets to wear a gown and go to the gala.
Oh,
Um,
that's so
so yeah, it's
wonderful.
been
Wow.
yeah, like I'm overseeing it, but work has been great so far. So I've
Mm.
been very blessed to have that.
Nice. So, did you have other friends that you came out to as well? Have you come out to most of your friends?
I don't know, it's awkward to say most of my friends. I think a lot of the friends who are here in New York and that I've interacted with in
Okay.
recent years,
Mm.
that I've come out to a lot of them. I remember my first friend who was like my best guy friend, and as like
Mm.
as a straight guy, like that was in many ways like the hardest
Yeah.
hurdle for me mentally to come out to.
Mm.
Yeah, and he was great. I mean, it took him, I think, a couple of days. He never reacted negatively. I think he just needed to like internalize and then come
Process
back.
it.
Like
Okay.
he once was like, it's like, oh, I was so supportive once I figured out it wasn't a joke. Like it was, which it was interesting. Yeah, and I didn't quite know how to feel, but
Hmm.
I take it positively.
Yeah.
And he's been wonderful since. And then with that encouragement, then it became comfortable to go out. Like I would host game nights at my place. So I'm like, all right, the game night crowd, I'll come out to them, which I did twice because I forgot. And then I came out again and they're like, yeah, we know. So
I
I
love
guess he
that
made
point, right?
yeah,
I think that's another
yeah.
common one where you like, um, somebody sees you for the first time, when you're dressed, and they kind of like give you a look, and you're like, "Oh, that's right. I never got a chance to tell you, huh? I forget who I told and who I didn't."
That's happened a number of times at work events because
Okay.
I'm still mostly, at least when we're in the office, I only been presenting like 4 or 5 times, and almost always at LGBTQ events. Um, but yeah, we had mental blocking on this famous actress's name. Orange is the New Black,
Why am I blanking too? Oh my god.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
so.
Uh,
Oh, it's gonna be nuts.
of course, as soon
I'm
as you
sure
need it,
someone in
it's
chat
gone.
is like saying it over and over again at some point. But uh,
Laverne Cox, thank you so
thank you,
much.
Laverne Cox. Yes.
Thanks,
So
Tubbs
Laverne Cox came and spoke
and
at
Jessica Kelly.
work for Pride, which was so cool.
Mhm.
And so that was my first time I ever went into work presenting. Um, I just came in for that. I had actually I came out to my boss and I'm like, hey, here's the deal, and I'm trans, and by the way, I want to take off the week of Pride because I kind of figured he couldn't say no with those two things together. He said, sure. But I'm like, but I still want to come back this day for this event. And so I got to do that. I got to come back. I got like a front row seat. And then afterwards, they had a 50-person meet and greet with her. So I got to go up and get a selfie and shake her hand. And she was awesome.
Huh.
Um, but I'm sorry, all this is to say that happened to a couple different colleagues where I'm like, hey, give me a list of everyone who's going to be there. So if I know any of them, I can come out to them beforehand. But there were
Okay.
still some other execs who kind of like a last minute decided to go who were in my department. So yeah, a number of them introduced themselves to me. And then I like introduced myself back. And like, and you already know me because, and then,
Ah.
I got the big reaction, which felt great that they did not recognize me at all. Like before.
Yeah, isn't that super validating? I love that. Oh, I love that. That's
So
awesome.
that was cool. So that has happened a number of times and still happens.
Oh, lucky girl.
So less so now that we're not in person.
Mhm.
Sorry, I feel like I'm nowhere near your question, but
We've meandered a bit. It's fine. So the next part in coming out is family. How has that gone for you, and who have you told, and kind of who's next?
yeah, and that has been amongst my biggest stumbling blocks, to be
Okay.
sure. Um, and I feel like almost most of my life and even progress in transitioning kind of has an inflection point before parents and after parents.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, in my head, double IPA coming back up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the um, the the plan had been to tell my parents together. Now I told my brother first, and my brother is someone who's awesome. I don't know if he's watching, but I didn't want to presume it, but I figured he would be great. And I was actually a little bit more concerned that he would be so determined that I should express my true self that he might inadvertently kind of out me. So I think my concern wasn't rejection. It was like, oh yeah, it was exuberant acceptance.
Okay.
But I shouldn't have. He was and has been wonderful. Both him and my sister-in-law. I told them together when they came in person. They didn't get to see me in person then, but we did go out and they got to meet a bunch of my friends that I hang out with. Yeah, I was somewhat awkwardly in boy mode around them because I'm like I'm not used to doing that around my other friends, but they got to meet my other friends and my brother and sister-in-law. So
Mm.
that was awesome.
Oh, great.
And then and they sent me a Kate Spade necklace the next week. Yeah, it was really sweet.
Mm.
So I felt
Yeah.
good with them. And then with the parents, we were on vacation all together, and over the course of the week, I got in some of those common parent comments because I had been single forever, and especially now I know why. I think it's hard to be the confident guy that you're told girls want when you're not confident that you are a guy. Um,
Makes
so
it a little tough. Makes it a little tough.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah, having that in the back of your head, not the easiest. And so there's like the what's going on in your life? You need to be moving forward. You need to be shaking things up. And in my head, I'm like, I am shaking up so much, but I can't tell you, and that's on me because I'm not out. Like if you knew the last 3 years, like it would be it's insane. Um, so that was at the start of the week. Come the end of the week, my dad, my brother, and I went out for drinks at a bar together out in Breckenridge. We were on this vacation, and Dad just did another one of those. And I don't think he wasn't expecting anything, but he's just like, "So, are you happy? Like, how are things going?" This is like this deep. We've had a couple of drinks question, and I just go, "You know what? I am, and here's why." And I launched into it. And I remember my brother was across from me while I'm talking to my dad, and my brother out of the corner of my eye, I just see his eyes go big as saucers, like, "Oh, you're actually doing this." Um, but yeah, I just came out.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad, I had certainly had different reasons to have some level of concern with my folks. They've always been wonderful, sweet people. I never expected they wouldn't love me. Um,
Okay.
but there was concern about would they still be accepting or would they ask me to stop.
Mm-hmm.
They both went to Gordon College, which is a Christian college up in Wintham, Massachusetts. My dad went on to Gordon Conwell Seminary. He didn't get ordained, but he could be. He decided that wasn't where his life was calling. Um, Dad, though, has always more often been liberal than not. Not that either parent was ever in any way conservative, but Dad had been a little bit more vocal, at least in expressing more liberal views. And I remember when one time he, unprompted by me, talked about Buttigieg and how awesome he thought it was that Buttigieg went to Mike Pence and said, "Your problem is not with me, sir. Your problem is with my creator." And I remember when Dad said that, unprompted to me, I'm like, okay, Dad's going to be okay. Like he's going to be okay. He'll be all right. And he is. Um, and so that was wonderful. And so now the struggle I have is that I still haven't told my mom.
Okay.
And I feel very bad about that. Obviously not enough yet to stop procrastinating on it, but I
Mm-hmm.
still feel terrible that I didn't tell them together, that there's this long delay.
Yeah.
Dad has been great in saying this is my thing to share, but I still hate that I am inadvertently, hiding something from him, or helping him hide something.
Yeah.
And so that's something I've said uh, to him. That's like I've been lying by omission. I don't think I've ever been expressly lying, but I've been omitting a lot of my life.
Okay.
I don't want to do that anymore. And so the way I've been procrastinating is spending a lot of time working on. All right, I have all these books on trans and Christianity. I want to understand it for myself, but also I can maybe arm her, or I can anticipate her questions, or I can anticipate the questions that she'll hear from her social circle, which is in central Pennsylvania, where my parents are like the only people who voted for Hillary and Obama and Biden, versus all of their friends, like, and how to arm her. But I also recognize it's also me. Just things are nice right now,
Uh-huh.
and I don't want to deal with that.
Try not to
And it's
rock the
very
boat, and yeah, you've got fears of what might come. Yeah, it makes sense. I think that again, another common theme. Um, did you have any support from anybody, work or social circle, family that you weren't expecting?
I think the depth of support I've gotten has surprised me in almost every place. I have
Okay.
two wonderful college friends, again, two people you named at the start here who were, jumping all over to join this, to a point where like they're like, "Oh, we're so excited for you. This is amazing. I took off today." I'm like, "Whoa, all right." Like it's but it's so wonderful. Um, so yeah, there's been constantly enthusiastic support, but one great source of connection were a lot of the people I connected with online. So you noted Amy is one of those awesome people who invited me to other Discord groups and other places and to create more and more stronger networks. So she's been wonderful, even though we've never gotten to meet in person
Mm-hmm.
um, yet. Then early on, there was a number of friends who I got to know that really helped me along. I had started some of that journey of all right. I went out with this small group of friends at their house, and I went and got a makeover. I
Mm-hmm.
still was never going out in public, um, and I was still never venturing out past my door, especially because my door has a hand operated elevator with a doorman in it 24/7. So there's no sneaking in or out of the building. Like I will be recognized. They will have to take me to my floor, but it only has 4 apartments per floor. Like there's no anonymous entry or exit in my building.
No such thing as incognito there. No.
Not even a little. So apparently some of them for a while thought I was my own sister visiting. So I guess there was more than I thought, but still, largely, yeah, the expectation was if I'm going out from my place, I'm coming out, and I would not been there. I did not get anywhere near there at the start of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have a couple people who I connected with first on Flickr, and then we all joined Instagram together.
Okay.
And it was, or around the same time at least. It was my friend Naomi, who is in outside Sydney in Australia. I want to say Naomi L84. I'm now immediately doubting that I have her Instagram name right. But Naomi is on Instagram all the time. It's wonderful. So she and I had been writing each other almost nightly on Flickr. And the weird thing where she's waking up and it's like 4 a.m. for me and we're writing each other. And we've been chatting a lot. And then we started to chat with our other friend, Sean, who is known as Ms. Nuclear on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sean actually invited me out to stay with her in New Mexico, which was very cool. And
Yeah.
that would have been my first time going out in public. And so that was awesome and terrifying. And but I was still excited to do it. And I wrote to Naomi, I'm like, holy crap, I'm actually gonna meet Sean and we're actually gonna go out. And Naomi was like, I just talked to my wife. She said it's okay. I'm gonna come too. And so she flew out from Australia to New
Wow.
Mexico,
Okay.
and the 3 of us spent a good chunk of a week out there. It was awesome. I think Sean, was farther along, especially than me. They are both full time and have been full time for a while now, where I'm still creeping along. Yeah, I think Naomi or Sean just started hormones around that time. Like there are people who so I don't know. I hope she doesn't regret it too much that she had someone who maybe was far more of a newbie than she was anticipating visiting her and staying at her place. But it was still something that I treasure that time and how it pushed me and the fun I had. Yeah, it was really really cool.
I've experienced that too, not too long ago, where you go and you hang out with somebody who presents really well, and you have that moment of like, am I making this group clockable because of of where I'm at in my transition? I'm not at this point. I'm not far along in hormones. I don't present as well as these other women, and like so you feel like, oh, am I dragging the group down?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I sometimes I still do. I feel bad like messaging her. Like I'm like, hey, I'm sorry to bug you on that. Yeah. It's weird, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And it's tough to deal with it because it's our societal thing, right? Because it's kind of horrible that those thresholds and expectations are set anyway. But yeah. But as I'm babbling, so that was something, those were 2 people who again I'd only met digitally. I never expected that would happen as
Hmm.
a result of that.
Yeah.
But even more foundationally, especially considering they're among my very best friends now, is the week before I went to New Mexico. 2 people who I had friended on Facebook, but I had never once interacted with, both messaged me out of the blue on like a Tuesday, and they both said, "All right, we see you posting all the time. We never see you out. So tomorrow you're coming out with us. We're going out on Wednesday." And
Hmm.
it was my friend Jessica, who is in the chat, and my other friend Danny, who I don't know if she's able to come by, but they both, I don't know if they coordinated or not, but they both messaged me the same day and said that's going to happen.
And that's Jessica
Um,
Callie.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jessica Lee. So I also do that same thing. I think Jessica Callie, even though it actually is just Jessica Lee smushed together.
Okay.
But
In my defense, I live in California. So when I
no,
see
no.
CALI, I just like I'm just so like
Yeah, believe me, I am not in any way correcting you. I absolutely still pronounce it that way every time I see her name inside my head. Like it's an understandable
yeah.
thing.
But I will get it right from now on, Jessica. I apologize for that.
Honestly, she might still like that. That might be intentional. I don't really know. I forget if we talked about it.
Callie's pretty
But
cool.
yeah, yeah, right.
Right.
But yeah, there's that Jess, and then or the other Jess, which I'm sure she says the same thing about me. But the and Danny, they both messaged me and say we're going out, and so there's this really amazing place, and it's gonna be interesting how it changes as generations get to where they're doing a better job recognizing and embracing different gender identities. But it's a venue called CDI, and it's on the west side of Manhattan, in the Hell's Kitchen area. And you go there, and you every Wednesday they have a dinner. And you can go in and you sit down, and they have 5 makeup stations and a photography station, all this kind of stuff. You can go there, change
Huh.
there, have dinner together, change back, and then go. And so I won't say where it is, and it's a place where you kind of have to reach out and kind of almost get interviewed, because a lot of people who go there are very heavily closeted. It's not something that's just not, for whatever reason, or even at times I think even generational norms of what they're used to, that just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like that's possible.
But yeah, I think you know it definitely at first, you feel
Yeah.
that way where like yeah, you really want to, you got to be out and you want to dress and stuff, but you still want to be in a safe, limited environment.
Mhm.
So that's wonderful. I wish I'd had something
Yeah.
like that here. I
Uh,
also met when I was part of a meetup group of trans people. I met a girl that what looked gorgeous. I mean, she was so well put together. It was insane. Like I was just like, you pass so well, and it was annoying at that point because I was so far from that. But she went to work in boy mode and was in boy mode everywhere. And it was
right.
only when in this meetup group that she would go all out. And so yeah, there are plenty of people like that simply can't go out in their lives for whatever reason, or
Yep.
they feel like they can't. So that's a wonderful place to have around.
It
Um,
is so cool. And just to close the loop with my friend Ashley in there, that night we went to a bar a couple blocks away, that was having a karaoke night, and Danny and Jessica invited Ashley over at Gotham City Girl. And so 3 people who probably spend most of my time with, including is my pod during this entire quarantine, but most of the last 4 years with, I met that night almost out of the blue. And all because they took a step to reach out to a complete stranger
hmm,
and demand I come out with them.
that's pretty lucky.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
Um,
a lot of them.
um, what were some of the key fears you had during your transition, and how have you and how are you overcoming them?
Right. There's this is it's very interesting. People talk. I've heard some people talk about, when I put on, that dress or that clothing, I feel relaxed, or that people get solace. And I think not that I don't have that, but more that I feel joy, but I don't necessarily always feel calm. I think every time I leave my door, I'm scared to some degree.
Hmm, okay.
Um, I think it's partly my own personality. I'm very much driven by what other people think. Every personality test at work, I'm on the extreme of whatever the people end is. That's like all the thing I'm focused on.
Uh-huh.
And no matter what I can think intellectually, emotionally, I'm still always concerned about how people are reacting.
Hmm.
And I think my own sort of preparedness is always trying to assume the worst. Like I'm always assuming, all right, everyone knows I'm trans and they're just being awesome and that's cool and we're going with it. Like, and that's okay. That's okay. But I think I set that as a starting thought in my head to help put myself, I don't even know if at ease is the right word, but to put myself in a framework to deal with what I might encounter. And I say that having honestly not really experienced anything negative. I've been, again, crazy blessed that I think it's a component of where I am, that here in Manhattan, it's probably going to be a more liberal place than not. And
Hmm.
you're also more likely to ignore everyone around you than not. So I think it's a double that lets me go out there and not really have to worry about encounters. But I still have anxiety almost every time I'm going up to someone new, or the waiter to ask to sit down, or whatever it is. Like I still have those little nuggets of concern.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that's the same level of things you're fearful of, but that's at least I have I think a continual low grade fear a
A
lot
low
of the
grade
time.
anxiety that's constantly there, yeah. Um, have have your transition goals shifted as you've gone through, and in what ways have they?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's always constantly shifting. And I think that even comes to the notion of recognizing that I'm trans. Um, I think every step along the way, um, two things have happened. And one is that I constantly met people who at various times were in similar places as me, and they made strong declarations about what wouldn't happen in the future. Lots of people who said, I will never transition, I will never take hormones, I will never want to be full time, I'll never do surgery, I'll never do lots of different things.
Uh-huh.
And not that there's anything wrong with any of those conclusions, but I feel like almost everyone I've heard or met who said a declarative like that ended up doing that thing like 3 months later. It was almost always that pattern of almost stereotypical, you're denying so strongly because that's you kind of thing. And
Makes sense.
and again, it's not like that's great. It's great that they were able to evolve and recognize something different about themselves and change and move on. So, but I think it's established its own degree of caution for myself that I'm like, I'm never saying never to kind of anything. Doesn't
Okay.
necessarily mean those things are likely, but I'm not gonna like tempt fate or put my own foot in my mouth by declaring anything. I am just, am I happy right now? Do I feel like I'm making progress in any sense? Do I feel like what I'm doing feels like I'm on a path that feels like I'm not I'm advancing in some aspect of my own personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am, then that's cool. And I don't need to set much of a goal beyond that.
Wow, that's
Um,
such a great outlook.
I mean, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
To the point of it shifting though, I think in the last about a little over a year ago is when I finally, I think, accepted that I was trans. Again, instead of just hoping I was, I finally said, okay, I actually am. That was also when I started hormones. And so I recognize I've committed myself to changes regardless of whether or not yeah, like there's progression happening without it being active on my part anymore, or at
Mm-hmm.
least not beyond the pill. Like yeah. Um the and I think to come with that, as you mentioned, can't really do laser right now. I expected to do that concurrently with hormones. That didn't happen. Um, but that's I think the next thing that really is a permanent change. I think most things I've done up to now were not there. There was no point of no return
Mm-hmm.
in particular that have been crossed. But I think I'm definitely in a place now where I can cross it and feel okay about it, and not have the same level of fear I did, even 2 or 3 years ago at the
Mm-hmm.
thought of doing laser and that being permanent, that kind of thing.
And what role has therapy played in this? Have you been seeing a therapist, and has that helped you get to this point of self-acceptance?
Yeah, very much so. And it's something I always believed in. I just hadn't necessarily done for myself. Like I've always thought therapy is a good idea. Um, but I think by and large, because I've mostly felt, I think, cheerful, it wasn't something I was necessarily too concerned about. Or even then, when I was starting to question my gender identity, I was hanging out with so many other people who were, and we were all talking about it so often. I never felt like there was something I was necessarily hanging on. That's not necessarily true, but that was sort of my thinking. Um, I went and finally got a doctor a couple years ago, and it's something I just needed to do. I've always had coverage. I just didn't have a doctor because I was lazy. I would just go to urgent care like the 3 times I was sick over the course of a decade. But I'm like, all right, I should be an adult, actually have a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a primary care physician. And so um, when I got one, I picked someone deliberately who had trans care as a specialty. And I didn't necessarily know that that was a service I was going to be utilizing, but I wanted that to be an option if I wanted to do so. And so I went and saw that doctor. Um, he said, yeah, I was upfront at the very start. Here's one of the reasons why I selected you. And I don't know if I'm there yet, but that's a possibility. And he's like, that's great. And of course I'm happy to help you. And even though this is an informed consent state, I think you should talk to somebody, talk to a professional before you do so. And I was like, oh yes, of course. I'm not trying to force, change the result. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but even then I that was not something that I was ready to believe could be true about myself.
All right.
And so it
Yeah.
was fully a year later after finally getting the like basically I was lining everything up to get hormones, but I still a year later before I finally went in and saw a professional.
Okay.
Um, and it was again someone who specialized in trans care as a mental health there professional. And I was and again someone who might be watching, I don't know. But she was someone who I went to explicitly because she was an expert on this subject, because I was mindful that when I go in there, I want to be honest about everything, but I also don't want to be like trying to stack the deck. I don't want it to be like, I want you to tell me I'm trans, because I did. I knew I did.
Okay.
And so I was concerned that I was going to shade all of my analysis and she would, I could trick her or something. Like I could, like I was scared of tilting that scale. So
Okay.
I had this 45-minute session with her. 15 minutes in, I finished dumping my guts, a lot of that origin story thought and all my concerns, and am I overindulging a fetish, or is it this or is it that, and I don't have dysphoria, and what's going on? Um, and she kind of paused for a second, and I think this is the way at least I remember it. She goes, "Yeah, okay, it's fair to say that you're transgender." And it's just like
Pretty sure. Pretty sure.
obviously, yeah, yeah, and yeah, it was a relief. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, and there was like even that moment, like, oh shoot, did I weigh those dice? Like, but still, the fact that I felt so happy to hear her say that was
Hmm.
itself a validating fact.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that was one of the
Even then, I'm
main.
like, well, shoot, we have half an hour left. What do we talk about? But
Yeah, and I
sorry,
think
I
that
cut
was
you
one
off.
of the main things that was off about my relationship with my therapist is like we never really kind of got there, and it's funny how much we need that. That's sort of outside. I guess it's just maybe it's I speak for myself and for you where we kind of seek that outside approval, like you mentioned, and
Yeah,
having that where someone else is telling you yes you're trans is that like extra bit of confidence or validation that you need to really believe it in yourself and go forward.
yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah, it's so different. I'd recognized all along, and again, this is the thing I had known that when I would go and change at CDI, and I would come out of the changing room, and these other women would be there, and they'd be like, "Oh wow, how many years have you been on hormones?" Like I would get these kinds of comments long before I'd started HRT, and it made me so happy. I was like, "Yes!" Like they think, yeah, yeah. Like I'm like, clearly something innately about me is is feminine in this way I want it to be. And it still felt too like it was a cheap trick for me to say I was trans. Like, yeah, like but that person there, that they worked for it. Like yeah, like I felt like I was cheating, to claim it. Yeah, having that external validation from someone who I saw as a professional was huge.
So
Um,
where are you at now? How confident do you feel as a woman or as a trans woman out just just in your life in
right.
general?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's still all kinds of ups and downs for a variety of different ways.
Uh-huh.
Um, like I said, I continue to have very pleasant interactions. That's wonderful, and I can imagine a variety of reasons and privilege that let it be that way. But I still am. There's some part of my brain that's like, oh, well, they know I'm trans, and they're being extra solicitous because they're coming probably from a good place, but they're being nice to the trans person. Like I
Hmm.
think that's a thought that's always in my head, that I have trouble accepting anything.
So you're
Um,
seeking the external validation and yet you're not accepting it when it comes.
yes, yes. Um,
Great.
yeah, I'm like, oh, you're just saying that. Yeah,
Yeah. Wonderful.
um, yeah. So there's definitely that component to it. So which I think it correlates to confidence.
Hmm.
And the many kinds of different imposter syndrome I can experience in life. This is just one of those, one of them.
It's a big
In
pile,
my
isn't it? Yeah, I
yeah.
definitely feel that too.
But I'll say there's a couple moments even over this past weekend where, and maybe it's also the added mask, literally of a face mask to be able to add a bit of distance there. But yeah, I was walking through and buying clothes and walking around stores and things in this mall, and realizing like, oh wow, I just went up to that guy and had a whole conversation with him, and I didn't freak out and panic about it beforehand. I just did it. I didn't think about what gender I was or what gender he was or how that interacted with each other, or like
Hmm.
I just did that, and it was just me and not me concerned about. people seeing me as a woman me. Like it was like I was able to do it without a mental filter. And that was a
Nice.
surprise. I'm like, have I been doing that for a while? Did I not like, what?
Where did that
When
come
did
from? Yeah.
yeah. But it doesn't happen often, but there are more unconscious moments than there were before.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, and that's definitely awesome.
Hey, Jeannie, welcome in. I'm a little remiss. I'm sorry. I don't know if you're still in the chat. We've had people coming in and going, but thank you so much. Whoever put in a tip, we got an anonymous tip. I love that
Ooh,
anonymous
wow.
tip. And Rosie, thank you so much for the gifted sub. Jeannie, welcome, welcome. Um, what have been your biggest hurdles during your transition?
Yeah. You know, I think we've talked about a number of them because for me, a lot of them are the emotional and mental hurdles
Uh,
of, in particular, coming out to mom.
yeah.
And so
Okay.
that as a big inflection point before I go more broadly. As it's my shadow. Like I think that's another big reason why I'm not full time at work, aside from wanting to be out to family first,
Mhm.
is that I'm too lazy, and the amount of time it takes to cover this is not something that I'm prepared to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I
And
feel
frankly,
that.
it hurts too much to shave this closely every day. Um,
Yeah.
that it's
Yeah.
hard to imagine how that would play out, but that's something I would demand of myself,
Okay.
trying to do this.
To do that. Wow.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Um, what aspect of your transition, what part of this, like hormones or surgeries you've had or anything that you've been through in your journey, what is the single most validating thing for you as a woman?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't have no surgeries of any sort yet, at least. I don't know what will come. Again, that's another thing where it's like I'll hit those when I feel like I need to hit them, and until
Hmm.
then, I'm cool. Um, you know, the I was very happy with what I could pull off and what I could do before hormones. And so that was especially its own stumbling block when I was not accepting that I was trans was, well, if I can look okay, why do I need to do anymore? But I
Yeah,
think I
that's
always
fair.
had this deep
Hmm.
curiosity of, well, what would be possible though? If
Yeah,
this is what I can do without it, then what can I do? What would happen with it?
the sky's the limit.
And yeah, and so that's been a journey where obviously I there's still a lot that's in flux. I mean, I have no idea where I'm going to end up or what I'll want to modify, but that's starting with hormones, starting to see my chest develop, especially, and being happy about it has been very validating. Like I look down and I catch myself out of the corner of my eye, and I can more often see myself as Jess, even when I haven't done makeup. Not always constantly, not when I look closely, but maybe for a brief second, out the corner of my eye, I'll be like, oh, holy crap, that was Jess in the mirror, like without me doing anything. Holy cow! And I think that was one of those self-reinforcing things where I was, again, I hadn't believed it, I hadn't accepted it, but then I started hormones, and so there was like the, oh crap, well that will I'll know if I regret that, and I haven't, and so it's something where it's not like I even have reached an outcome I'm perfectly happy with or confident with, so much as I find that I am not in any way sad about the fact that my body is changing, and indeed am very happy about it.
Mhm.
And so
Y-
that's something that I didn't necessarily know for sure what's going to happen. And I think
Okay.
that's a validating thing.
Yeah, I'm finding that a very similar thing where I have these the next step I'm always kind of trepidatious and afraid of. And then
Yeah.
once I get through it, it's just like, you know, no, this is great. This is great. And kind of what's next? And then I'm afraid of the next thing.
Right, right. But I think each one gets so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Very
and
true.
and and well, I think how many years I was terrified to come out to the doorman and how wonderful they've been since I did.
Aw.
Like it's amazing. And but it didn't feel any less impossible back then. And even now thinking about what I've done, I'm like, well, but so much other things have happened to collectively make it true that it's hard for me to say like I regret not doing things sooner because I don't understand how it would have been possible. I feel like
Yeah.
everything that happened had to happen. I
Yeah.
don't know how it could have gone faster. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's the way it is for all of us. We have to come out when we're ready to, and you like the idea of coming out earlier, but there's no way to do that. You have to come out when you're ready for it. What were some of the biggest learning curves that you've had to get adjusted to in your transition?
Yeah, there's some ones with myself and self-acceptance that have taken a while. When I was out there with Ms. Nuclear in person, I was still wearing a corset every time I went out. Steel boned, like it was severe. I don't think it had a weird shape, but I was just like, I have to have this figure for it to be a valid presentation.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then I gradually like realized that that was just absolutely ridiculous and moved to at least a cinch. And I was wearing a cinch all the time. And then really, it was about the same time when I started going with my own hair towards the start of the quarantine, um, that I really kind of let those things go. And so that was its own curve of, again, self-acceptance, to be able to feel like I didn't need to do all those things, and also reinforcing that I can feel confident, more confident about myself, that I don't have to do those things and still be happy with how I look.
Hmm.
So I think it was a curve in recognizing that not all of these things I believed were necessary were actually necessary. I imagine that applies in other ways that are less visible than those. That's just the ones that I think stuck out for me the most.
Okay. Now we get
Get it
to
to my
as
random answer for that one.
now we get to the fun stuff as we're getting to the end here. My
Awesome.
favorite question of all of them: how did you choose your name?
Very lazily, and you know, it's something that a little subconscious to express again because I'm not out full time, and I've given probably enough clues to be tracked down. But it's close to my boy name, or to at least a variation of it that it's easy to go with.
Okay,
So that would be at the
that's it.
moment what I can comfortably say. Yes. So sorry for that great question. After this, after everyone's not watching, I can.
Well,
But yeah, and I,
I've always thought that, I should ask the follow-up question if somebody's name question, answer isn't, super deep or whatever. Is
yeah,
there a particular meaning behind your username that you have? And I feel like there sort of was. We were talking, I was asking you before the show, do you prefer, should I put Jessica on here or Jess?
great. Well, there's something too. There's a number of names that I've always liked, and there are things like Rebecca or Jessica, different names that are a little bit longer,
Mm,
and I guess you could say fancier. But one of the things I've also liked about them is that there's also always a casual, um, I'm forgetting cognomen, I forget, but yeah, Becca or Jess. Like I think that's like that there is this casual one, and I think of myself as a relatively casual person.
uh,
Blazer aside, this is just I like this, but the like I tend to think like I'm a t-shirts, jeans, and boots kind of gal. Like I love a lot of other outfits, but that's my default.
yeah,
And
your
so
Instagram
I think
definitely will back that up. That's for sure.
and I'm saying, of course, 42 is the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Oh, okay, there you go. Awesome. And then the big question that we ask everybody, what advice do you have for young or closeted trans people out there?
That's great. Great question. And I think the biggest one, and it ties directly in some of the questions you've asked, is finding community. There's nothing that has not made me feel like I have advanced more, felt more confident about myself, felt I got to give back to others than creating ties in a sense of community.
Yeah.
And that's been true explicitly in trans spaces as I made friends there. But frankly, almost every other relationship I've had where I've come out so far, and admittedly, I've been picking who I come out to so far, but almost every relationship has grown deeper as a result of sharing this deeper part of myself. So um, I think there's something to finding your community to get to expand with and reinforce, but I think it then amplifies into almost every other relationship you can have, and then that yeah it cascades.
Yeah.
So find community.
Yeah. Once you have community, once you have that support, then everything else is possible, basically.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, so that's the
Yeah,
thing to
yeah.
seek
No,
out
yeah. No matter
first.
what stage you are, or even how fast you advance. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I talked over you.
I've been talking over you all night, so it's fine. Jess, thank you for agreeing to come on and tell us so much of your story.
No, this was so fun. Thank you for bearing with so much of my babbling. This was awesome.
And yeah, with that, I will close out and we'll see you all next Tuesday. Have a great night. Bye.